Hi everyone, Dr. Peter Salerno here. I am a retired licensed psychotherapist, personality disorder specialist, trauma specialist, and I'm featured in a docuseries on Hulu and Disney Plus called Ted Bundy Dialogue with the Devil. I get a lot of questions saying, why are you retired? Why did you retire? So I want to clarify what retirement means. Retirement doesn't mean that I no longer work. Retiring a license means that you're changing the status from actively practicing psychotherapy to no longer practicing in a clinical setting. I'm no longer operating from the position of running a private practice. I still write, I still teach, I still instruct and train therapists. I offer consultation in a non-clinical format for people who want to gain an understanding of the relationships that they're dealing with. So it's not to say that I'm not working, it's just the retirement status is how they officially refer to the license no longer being active. And I just wanted to clarify that because I get a lot of comments and emails and questions about when did you retire? Why did you retire so young? It's not that I retired from working. It's just that I've chosen to no longer be active in my therapy practice. And down the road, if I choose to unretire my license, I'm able to do that. So at this point in my career, I'm just focusing more on research and writing and education. So before we dive in, I like to give this disclaimer and I like to ask this respectfully. Please keep the comments respectful. In the past, when I did not say this in the beginning of a video, I was pretty much assaulted with harsh criticism, devaluing, harsh critical comments that were somehow justified by the commenters saying that they were offended by the material or that I was using stigmatizing or pejorative language. And the reality is, if you specialize in the treatment of personality disorders and you attend required trainings, this is how people talk in these clinical settings. This is how they talk in the trainings. They don't have to offer disclaimers because they understand that the people who are attending the trainings know, look, we know that you're professionals. You're coming here because you want to learn about this. And we use clinical language because it helps with the descriptive and explanatory pathology. So nobody has this idea that people's feelings are going to get hurt. I understand this is a different forum because this is a social media platform. And I did oftentimes in my first videos make the assumption that people were going to understand that when you share science, you don't necessarily need to offer disclaimers. But I learned the hard way that you do. So comments that are disrespectful to me or disrespectful to other commenters who have suffered immeasurable harm and abuse, they're just not tolerated. So they're going to either be deleted or if they are threatening or harassing, they're going to be reported. So I just want to clarify, if you want to stick out like a sore thumb and be the person who for no reason other than you want to is going to insult the other commenters on this post, or you're going to insult me because you're misinterpreting what I'm saying, it's going to be dealt with in a way where it won't be tolerated. These videos are opportunities for understanding, not grounds for cyber abuse or assault. So today we are going to discuss obsessive compulsive personality disorder. Much different than OCD, they are not related except by name. I'm going to start with the distinction between obsessive compulsive disorder and obsessive compulsive personality disorder, just to get that out of the way. Because a lot of people say things like, I'm so OCD, or that person is so OCD. And often what they mean is they're referring to this type A characteristic personality, not the intrusive thoughts and compulsive behaviors that alleviate the anxiety in somebody who is afflicted with obsessive compulsive disorder. So, obsessive compulsive disorder, the one that is not related to personality, is a condition where there are intrusive thoughts and compulsive behaviors that are meant to alleviate the anxiety that results from those intrusive thoughts. This is when you see things like ritual hand washing and other things where people have to do something repetitively because they're trying to alleviate the anxiety that they're feeling. And this is an ego dystonic condition. What that means is the person who is going through this understands that something is fundamentally wrong inside and that they're not okay with it and they don't justify it. It's afflicting them. Whereas people with a personality disorder, they have an ego syntonic experience, which means they don't think that there's something wrong. They justify their distorted or disordered lens. And if you watched my video on avoidant PD, I confessed in that video that I've suffered from avoidant personality disorder my entire life. Somebody with an anxiety related avoidance knows that the way that they're thinking is wrong, that there's something wrong about it, that it's irrational. They don't justify it and say, no, this is the truth. They say, I understand this is problematic and I want to do something about it. I just don't know how to turn it off. Avoidant personality disorder, like other personality disorders, the person who has the disorder, they don't think to themselves, there's something wrong with the way I'm thinking. They think, see, I was right. I'm justified in perceiving reality this way. The world really is that scary, and therefore I have to avoid it. I really will be humiliated, and therefore I have to isolate and avoid. So I'm willing to admit that about myself because I think it helps and informs people understand the difference between somebody who's afflicted with something that they really don't like and they understand that there's something wrong with it, and somebody who justifies their perspective even though the perspective is based on a distortion. It's not based in truth. But for that person, it is their truth. And to use another example, when we talk about narcissism, narcissists truly feel entitled to mistreat people because their disordered lens is grandiose. It's, I do have a special superior place in the world. People just need to accept that, and then everyone will get along. They don't think to themselves, I should probably fix this within myself. It doesn't occur to them that being grandiose is problematic. What occurs to them is when other people confront them, that's the problem. It's happening out there. It's not happening in here for the narcissist. And although the operating system is different for somebody with obsessive compulsive personality disorder or avoidant personality disorder, that mechanism of inflexibility is the same. So the first recourse is not to look inward and say, I need to probably self correct this because it's not working. The reason why it's considered a personality disorder rather than a mood disorder or a trauma disorder is because with mood and trauma disorders, the person is aware that the symptoms that are afflicting them are interfering with their life and need to change. On the contrary, when it comes to a personality disorder, the personality tells that person, due to the perceptual gaps and distortions, there's nothing wrong with me. It really is happening out there. One of the reasons I think why cluster Bs are the ones who get the most attention is because those are the ones that cause the most significant impairment in interpersonal relationships because of the traits that make up those disorders. They're different than the traits that make up the cluster C disorders. So, cluster C disorders, I will admit, can cause a lot of harm in relationships, especially when we're talking about avoidant personality, because as I mentioned in my other video, if you are in a relationship with someone who's avoidant or you're trying to be friends with someone who's avoidant, their avoidance eventually becomes so pervasive that it's almost like you stop asking them to participate in the relationship because you're going to get let down by them because they have convinced themselves that they're going to receive harsh ridicule and shame before anything even happens, that they stop altogether even trying to socialize with you. And so that can be really painful for the person on the receiving end of dealing with someone with avoidant personality. I mentioned in that video too that the way that you treat avoidant personality is you don't go down memory lane as to all of the horrible things that happened in their life because that's actually not going to stop them from being avoidant. What's going to stop them from being avoidant is installing the traits that are really deficient or lacking in them and strengthening them. Traits like resilience, traits like courage, the ability to just do the thing anyway, even though it terrifies them. They typically stop at, I've convinced myself this is going to be so horrible and humiliating that it's not even worth trying. I can't do it. And what you need to do is install that capacity of, I can do it in spite of the fear. And you have them practice that over and over and over again, that eventually they have enough evidence to realize they were wrong, that the humiliation and the criticism actually are survivable. When they get to that point, they can start functioning in social situations more adaptively. It's not easy. And as I mentioned in that video, these are traits that I am always going to be afflicted with. It's never going to be something that I completely conquer. I'm not sure if there are others out there with avoidant traits at the severe end of the continuum who have conquered them. If there are and you're watching this, please leave a comment so that people can understand your journey and see how you've overcome it. I think it's something that's going to be a lifelong struggle, but I think it can be much more manageable if the right interventions are implemented. Going back to obsessive compulsive personality disorder, OCPD is a rigid, pervasive way of being. It's the entire operating system. It's not a symptomatic condition. It's not hypervigilance related to trauma or depression related to a mood disorder. It is the entire operating system, which is why we call them personality disorders, because they actually cause the entire person to operate out of order, hence disorder. It's not an insult. Regarding prevalence estimates, OCPD is considered to be the most common or most prevalent of the 10 recognized personality disorders in the DSM. So this is the most prevalent disorder, OCPD. The main feature, the defining feature of obsessive compulsive personality disorder is rigidity. It's that inflexibility, the trait that they need, that they are lacking, that would balance the rigidity is more flexibility. So this causes people with OCPD to see themselves as the righteous one. They are doing the best. They are striving for perfection. They are doing the most. Sadly, what that means for people in their life is they see others as lax and not doing a good enough job. They might even refer to others as careless because they perceive them as not trying hard enough, when in reality, the person with OCPD is in fact trying way too hard in ways that are just unrealistic. They see the world as contaminated or disordered, and the way they cope with this is they feel that they have no choice but to control everything in their life. Regarding the diagnostic themes, they are preoccupied with details and lists to the point where they actually lose sight of the activity or the task. Their perfectionism interferes with their ability to complete tasks. They have an excessive devotion to work and productivity. So this is that workaholism that people often see in individuals with this disorder. They have a rigid inflexibility about morals and values, but the morals and values that they are rigid and inflexible about are their own. So they really don't have the capacity for understanding other people's values and morals. It really comes down to theirs are right, so everyone else's must be wrong. Some do show hoarding behaviors, but hoarding disorder doesn't have to be comorbid or accompany OCPD. There's a reluctance to delegate tasks because they have to be in charge because they're the only ones who know how to do things right. They tend to be stingy with money or resources, which goes way beyond frugal. And they have an overall general rigidity and stubbornness in their perspective. Something that's interesting about OCPD is while they do tend to externalize blame because they think others aren't doing a good enough job, they also are very, very critical of themselves because they believe that they have to strive for perfection. So if something goes wrong, they actually often believe it's their fault. So everything must be perfect. And that's what differentiates OCPD from the cluster B disorders. Because if you take a cluster B disorder like narcissism, they are not going to think anything is their fault. The way that the narcissistic world works is I'm right, everyone else is wrong, end of story, no questions. And they feel very confident in that reality that everyone else is wrong and they are right. With OCPD, that rigidity can be really hard to deal with in relationships, and they feel very closed off in a way. So people can often mistake it for narcissism. But what it really is, they're holding themselves to such a high standard. So they are very controlling, domineering, oftentimes critical. But that criticism is also on themselves. It's their fault if something's not perfect. And so that's why we see the fear. That's why this is in the cluster C, because it's more associated with fear and anxiety than exploitation. The person with OCPD must be in control at all times. One of their recurring themes in their mind is life is very demanding and there is no room for errors whatsoever. Their identity is typically tied to work and productivity, things that they can see measurable progress with, that they are in charge of. Emotions tend to be restricted, controlled, and rarely expressed in a vulnerable way. So, with these individuals, goal direction and self direction sort of becomes a trap. They are so moralistic and conscientious to a fault that they can't complete many of the tasks they start because nothing's ever good enough. And empathy can be a challenge. It's not the same deficit you see in narcissism, which is a lack of concern for others and an indifference to the feelings and needs of others. It's more about rigidity, being so focused on a task that they can't step away to attend to someone else's needs. It doesn't feel good to be on the receiving end of it, but I just want to clarify the motivation is different. And sadly, when it comes to relationships, they come second to work. Productivity is the priority, and so personal connections inevitably suffer. So the traits that we see there that are inherent in a obsessive compulsive personality, rigid perfectionism, an insistence that everything must be flawless, restricted emotional expression, and intimacy avoidance because tasks and productivity and work have to come first. Behaviors can look like speech that goes off on tangents and over explains, procrastination because it's never good enough to finish, endless list making and scheduling, workaholism, and micromanagement. And here's where I differ from many of the modern trends in psychology. OCPD is not the result of childhood trauma. These are human traits: rigidity, conscientiousness, morality, taken to extremes. Some of these tendencies can be learned and adopted because of environmental influence, but not everybody who adopts and learns these traits experience them or take them to the extreme that somebody with a personality disorder does. These traits have been around as long as humans have, and historically, people were described by their character, their virtue, and their flaws. Writers and philosophers debated for thousands of years how to balance out these traits for the good of the community. It's only a recent occurrence that trauma stories are embedded in the thinking structure of everyone to explain every single behavior. And even if trauma has occurred, which oftentimes it does occur, people with OCPD, many of them have been abused. Many also have not. But those who do have trauma, the present traits that are impairing life still need to be balanced out. And you don't balance rigidity with endless trips down memory lane in therapy. It will not make somebody with OCPD any less rigid if you go down memory lane with them and have them gain insight into their history. It really will not make them any less rigid. Behavior change in the here and now and practicing a new way of being is what is going to work. So other people react to individuals with OCPD, seeing them as rigid, stingy, cold, demanding, sarcastic. Some people feel compelled to try and please them and meet their standards. Other people feel provoked or triggered by them, and other people feel controlled by them. Treatment is about balancing out these excessive and deficient traits. So turning perfectionism into flexible, reasonable standards, replacing my way or the highway with perspective taking, shifting workaholism to incorporating leisure and rest and fun, moving from indecisiveness to healthy decision making, expanding restricted affect into genuine affection, transforming stinginess into frugality or even generosity, and learning to let things go. So to sum it up, OCPD, rigid, controlling, emotionally constricted, rarely satisfied with their own level of order or with anyone else's. Cluster C disorders don't get as much public attention as cluster B disorders, but they really can cause deep suffering in others. I am a perfect example of that because, as I mentioned, I have lived with these avoidant personality traits. I can guarantee you these traits were not embedded in me or instilled in me through trauma or adversity. I know there's going to be some analysts out there who say, well, you just repressed it so much that you don't even remember and you're in denial. Okay, that's a perfect theory because you can't test it. Point is, from personal experience, these are not quirky personality styles. I also get comments, why are you pathologizing everybody's personality? These are just differences. Okay, well, I'm the first to admit, somebody who has cluster C pathology, differences to this extreme cause immense suffering in the individual and in the people in their lives. And so it is the person's responsibility to do something about balancing out those traits. And reliving your history in therapy for 10 years and blaming your mom and dad and your teachers and your upbringing and all of that, even if they didn't do a great job, still will not make you flexible. So the interventions still need to be geared around changing the behavior, not processing the trauma. Trauma interventions can deal with the trauma, but even if you heal all of your trauma with evidence based trauma interventions, you will still have the full blown personality disorder because the personality disorder doesn't go away once the trauma symptoms go away. And they've done replicated studies to prove this and longitudinal studies to measure this. These are pervasive ways that are rigid and inflexible and shape someone's entire life and affect all important areas of life. It's not a reaction to adversity. Trust me. If you recognize these patterns in yourself or someone else, remember it is never about blame. Whether we're talking about the heritability, the genetic influence, the biological underpinnings, or the environment that exacerbated or amplified it, it's never about blame. That doesn't get you anywhere. It's about understanding, compassion, and when possible, effective treatment. Thank you for watching. I'm Dr. Peter Salerno. If you found this helpful, please feel free to view my other videos. Subscribe to this channel for more videos to come. I also encourage you to read my book, The Nature and Nurture of Narcissism and Traumatic Cognitive Dissonance. There's a lot of commenters out there that refer to me as a reductionist and a biological determinist. I know for a fact they haven't read my book because if they had read it and they did their due diligence, they would know that that is categorically untrue. I don't believe in environmental determinism and I don't believe in biological determinism. Again, please leave comments and please make sure that they are respectful to me and to everyone else. I want this to be a community where people feel safe to disagree or to be curious, but it doesn't necessarily have to involve antagonism or insults or belittling or devaluing in any way, shape, or form. Until next time, take care, and I will hopefully see you in the next video.